Okay. Basically, we're going from Deansgrange. Whatever. Let's see.
Delta variant, because there in recent weeks there has been a rise and fall in case numbers of Delta, so it will take a little bit longer to be absolutely certain. I suppose on that big question when it comes to making decisions about reopening those services indoors in bars and restaurants, there doesn't appear to be anything coming government's way in relation to public health advice that would suggest that that decision would have to be delayed. But equally, there is some way to go, some way to travel to when decision day is due there, and that is at the end of next week.
So pubs and restaurants who are preparing to allow people inside to eat and drink on Monday week, is there any prospect that that could change?
I think the feeling among ministers is that when people talk about the wider reopening in Northern Ireland and Britain being delayed, that is a different thing to what's being discussed here. And in that, in those places, you do have indoor dining and you have pubs open indoors as well. So for those reasons, taking that next step appears at this point that it is on track, but that the decision will be taken very close to the time, possibly on Thursday or Friday of next week. So I suppose there is potential for a change in advice at that point. There is no, as I understand it, no informal word has gone to government about the need to apply the brakes in relation to this or to send out signals. But I sense too very clearly that if the public health advice was to change, there is no appetite among those sitting around that cabinet table to oppose it or to go in a different direction, and that is significant too.
That's July the 5th, and then 2 weeks later travel into and out of the country will be easier, well, a bit easier. Most people will need a travel cert, which could include a negative PCR COVID test. Now, there were newspaper reports this morning that could be got through the HSE testing centres for free, but not so according to Government Junior Minister Oisin Smith.
So in order to get a test certificate, it must be, you must have been tested by a private lab. So the HSE is not going to provide
right, okay, so even if you get a test through your GP because you were close contact, you cannot use that for your digital cert.
Exactly, yes, it has to be a private test. So that's how the system is. That's how the system is set up, or that's what the policy is that the HSE has decided that its resources have to be focused on public health and on protecting people from the pandemic, and that they're not going to use their testing resources to test people for foreign travel.
That's Oisin Smith with Claire Byrne on RTE Radio 1 earlier. Well, that's clear, Micheál, isn't it?
Well, it does seem to be the case that what you do have at the moment, following on from the cyber attack on the HSE systems, is that people have been able to self-refer for tests, but by the time July 19 comes around, that will no longer be the case. So people will have to get a private test done if they're going to use it to be eligible for international travel, if it's one of those 3 criteria that they're going to travel under. I think when it comes to international travel generally, that is a discussion as well for late next week, and I suppose it is worth pointing out on that front that is the one area where you do see some deviance as things stand between the Chief Medical Officer and some government ministers around that question of people who are not fully vaccinated and whether or not they should travel abroad for non-essential reasons. And I think that is likely to be in focus when decisions are made about the wider reopening if things go in a certain direction around the Delta variant.
Separately, Micheál, did party leaders talk about the maternity hospital?
I think when it comes to the maternity hospital, there is a view that this is going to take some time now, and the next step is the health minister going to meet with the stakeholders involved, the Sisters of Charity and the St. Vincent's Hospital Group. And while there has been momentum kind of injected into this, that it still is some way off anything like a resolution. What you do see is a clarity around government thinking on this that wasn't there before, and perhaps even a change in direction where there is a clear preference now for the state to fully own that site out whether it's gifted to them or whether it's purchased. In the Dáil this week, what you will see when the Social Democrats put down their motion calling for a fully publicly owned hospital, the government won't oppose it.
Micheál, thank you. That's our political correspondent, Micheál Lahan. Let's hear more now on the Delta variant of COVID-19, making up, as we heard, at least 1 in 5 of new cases here, and probably part of a cluster of cases in Athlone within the last 2 weeks. That's according to the Director of Public Health for the HSE Midlands, Dr. Una Fallon. Anyone who was at a gathering in the town along the River Shannon on June the 11th or at a number of subsequent parties has been urged to get a COVID test. Professor Emer Shelley is Dean of the Faculty of Public Health Medicine at the Royal College of Physicians of Ireland. Professor Shelley, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Gavin.
How much more contagious is this strain of the virus?
We believe from the UK that it is approximately 60% more contagious than the variant which arose in Kent. So the one from India is known as the Delta, the one from Kent is known as the Alpha. But there's a lot that we can do to reduce the impact of that Delta variant. And of course, we already have done a certain amount with the extensive vaccination program that has already been rolled out. So that does give at population level some protection, and particularly to those who are most vulnerable. But the Delta variant is certainly something of major concern to public health.
What evidence, if any, is there that it is more transmissible outdoors than previous variants?
Being very honest, Gavin, I'm a bit sceptical about the public discourse on that, because there have been stories about people catching it out of doors with just the most transient of connection between people. But it's quite possible that that was not the source of the infection in the first place. So I think to continue the advice of being outdoors, it's good for people, it's good for mental health, but being careful in crowded places. That's the real concern, even outdoors. Mixing in close contact with people, perhaps with alcohol involved and so on. Now that is a recipe for transmission.
What about the consequences of contracting this strain of the virus? Is there any evidence that you're more likely to get sick as a result?
Not that I'm aware of. The hospitalisations have gone up in the UK, but that's a reflection of the increase in cases. But also we can say that there may not have been sufficient time from that increase to where you would see further increase in hospitalisations, because there is a lag time between the infections, the hospitalisations, the ICU admissions, and unfortunately then the deaths.
If the battle with COVID could be described as a race, and in this case a race between the vaccines and emerging variants, what would you say to the argument that as more people are vaccinated, particularly more people who might be vulnerable to getting sick from the virus, that it doesn't matter how much the variant spreads if people are protected by a vaccine?
That is absolutely true. The difficulty is that right now we're not all fully vaccinated, but a very large percentage of the most vulnerable are. And that gives us huge protection. And it doesn't just protect the individuals who are vaccinated, it also gives protection to those that they come in touch with. They're less likely to become infected, so they're less likely to pass it on.
As you said, most people are not fully vaccinated. The majority, most people have had a first dose of a vaccine here, but we're about to open up pubs and restaurants, as we heard there, for people to mix, to drink indoors in close proximity. We're about to open up travel into the country. Would you have concerns about the spread of the variant of the virus at this time when most people aren't fully vaccinated?
Both of those are of concern, there's no doubt about it. But people are already mixing in situations where they're accessing alcohol. So there is a case to be made for it being safer in what are called controlled environments. The real difficulty is what people do on their way to the pub, on their way to the restaurant, and what they do afterwards. I can see from an economic point of view and all sorts of other reasons why we would want to open the restaurants for indoor dining if that is at all possible. Travel into the country is a different issue. I can see why essential travel, people coming to see family and so on, is really important. So we talk about travel as if it was all the very same. There's a difference between going on the ferry from here to Holyhead and back and heading off to Indonesia or faraway places with, mixing in transit lounges with people from all over the world and so on. So I would be of the opinion that non-essential travel should continue to be avoided for people's personal reasons. Who wants to be in a country where there is an escalation of cases, their health service is under threat, and perhaps, having some minor reason to need a health service and having difficulty accessing that, and then difficulty getting back from there when a holiday is over.
Professor Emer Shelley, Dean of the Faculty of Public Health Medicine at the Royal College of Physicians of Ireland, thank you for speaking to us. The DUP have a new leader. Again, it's Jeffrey Donaldson. No one else looked for the job. 5 weeks ago, he lost a contest to lead the biggest party in Stormont to Edwin Poots. He stepped down last week after just 21 days after defying his party to nominate Paul Givan as First Minister after the British government promised to legislate for an Irish Language Act if Stormont didn't by the autumn. His coronation comes on the 100th anniversary of the official opening of Northern Ireland's first Parliament. Let's talk to political commentator Alex Kane. Alex, good afternoon.
Hello, Gavin.
In his statement, Jeffrey Donaldson talked about having the vision to lead unionism, the vision to unite Northern Ireland, and the vision to lead the DUP. Alex, you've been watching Jeffrey Donaldson's career for a very long time. Did you ever see him as leader of the DUP?
Oddly enough, I didn't. I thought he was likely at one point to have been leader of the Ulster Unionist Party, but when he left there, I thought, I just didn't think the DUP would want to take someone from another party. But then they took Arlene Foster, who obviously defected at the same time as he did. They've had a terrible lot of luck with Edwin Poots. So I think they looked for the safest pair of hands, and as it turns out, the only pair of hands.
Yes.
To rise to this particular challenge. But you're right, Gavin, the biggest challenge of all is not the protocol, it's not dealing with unionism, it's not a number of other issues. The biggest problem of all he now has is uniting the party, because as you say, just a few weeks ago, of the selection of the 36, 19 of them voted against him. And I can't imagine why some of those people may think that Poots has let them down. I'm not expecting them all to go suddenly gravitate towards some sort of love with Jeffrey and think he's wonderful. So he has his work cut out.
What's he going to do now, do you think?
Well, I think first of all he has to steady the nerves. He has to block the leaks. The greatest curse for any political party, doesn't matter what side of the border, where in the world they are, it's perception. It's how potential voters see them. It's how other people see them. And for a very long time, certainly from about 2003, past 15, 16 years, the perception of the DUP was that it was a strong party, a united party, a winning party, a party from a unionist point of view that was worth voting for. That perception over the past few weeks has been destroyed. So somehow, in a very short time, Gavin, because the next election is due for next May, and I suspect May will come in autumn, somehow in the next matter of weeks, Donaldson has to persuade enough unionists that the DUP is still worth voting. Because if he doesn't do that, if the DUP doesn't remain the largest party of unionism, then it's very likely that there will be a Sinn Féin First Minister and probably a Sinn Féin Justice Minister. That's how high, from a unionist perspective, the stakes are right now.
You mentioned the protocol. He will be under pressure to achieve some form of win on the protocol before any election, whenever that might be. His predecessor, Edwin Poots, he was speaking to Good Morning Ulster on the BBC this morning. He said he had been promised significant changes on the protocol by Britain's Northern Secretary. Let's hear what he had to say.
Yes, I've received assurances that there will be changes to the protocol, and that will be very significant. That there will be, the UK government are not going to tolerate how things are and how the EU have conducted themselves since the protocol.
Are those promises made to you personally by Brendan Lewis as DUP leader?
Yes, we've been promised that there will be a significant win on the protocol. So that's what the Secretary of State is indicating at this stage.
Okay.
Alex Kane is still with us. He didn't sound too sure there.
No, he didn't sound too sure. And I remember it back in November 2018 when Boris Johnson, who hadn't become Prime Minister at that point, but when Boris Johnson addressed the DUP conference, and everyone was one of those people on their feet roaring their approval when Johnson said there would never be a border down the Irish Sea, Northern Ireland would never be reduced to semi-colonial status. So I'm a little bit surprised, just to say a little bit cynical, that Pearse could so easily have been won over, particularly since when he was pushed a little bit further in the interview about the details, he was very vague about details. And bear in mind as well, Gavin, that he after he'd done that deal with Sinn Féin over the Irish language and with the Secretary of State, he went to address his MLAs. He didn't win them over. He went to address the party officers. He didn't win them over. And less than 12 hours after he had given the nod to this deal, he was out of office. So he seems to be playing this line that somehow he has been promised something. So I think Donaldson will be officially ratified on Saturday. I think Donaldson's first protocol will be to Brandon Lewis, the Secretary of State, to say, first of all, Brandon, what did you promise, Edwin, and are those promises transferable? Because there is absolutely no way that the protocol is going to disappear in the next few weeks. And a lot of unionism, particularly loyalism, those that are on the streets right now having the protest, building up to the marching season on the 12th of July, they, in my opinion, Gavin, are not going to be bought off by, we've tinkered with the protocol, we've done a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but in effect, it's still there. They will not buy that.
Alex Kane, thank you. The Chief Executive of Aer Lingus has reiterated that the company will not reverse its decision to close the cabin crew base at Shannon Airport. Lynn Embleton said the base was expensive and an impediment to restoring flights. She was speaking at a hearing of today's Joint Oireachtas Committee on Transport, as Tommy Mescal of our political staff now reports.
No company can withstand €1 billion of damage and not make changes and not adapt its business. We have to adapt our business.
Lynn Embleton, the newly appointed CEO of Aer Lingus, was at the Oireachtas Transport Committee this morning discussing the challenges facing the airline, and she warned of a difficult journey ahead.
There is uncertainty and there is worry, but it's my job to ensure that Aer Lingus comes out of this crisis and is able to get back to doing what we want to be able to do. And to do that, I do need to restructure. I need to get us to a point where we have effective costs that supports flying.
Lynn Embleton expressed hope that downsizing could be achieved through voluntary redundancies.
Aer Lingus has fewer employees now than it had going into the pandemic. The majority of that has been able to have been achieved through voluntary means, and we would hope that we could generally continue to right-size through voluntary means. But we are in dialogue with the unions.
The turbulent year has already led to casualties. Aer Lingus insisted today that it wouldn't restore its Shannon cabin crew base. One Clare TD, Cathal Crowe, said he couldn't understand the maths behind the decision.
Staff in Shannon who've long serviced your routes, the cabin crew staff, would contend that it's actually far more expensive to have 4 members of cabin crew minibused down from Dublin, overnighting and receiving all the overnighting allowances and everything else that comes with that. I've heard costings ranging from around 240,000 per annum to 300,000 and even in excess of that.
Well, we have fully evaluated this decision, and it is significantly better for Aer Lingus and therefore better for sustaining routes to be drawing on cabin crew from an alternative base.
While Senator Timmy Dooley asked what effort the airline made to engage with staff before the decision was made.
The workers that I know best, were well prepared to engage with you to reach that level of compromise that would have allowed for the retention of connectivity.
There's been extensive discussions with staff and with the union representatives since this pandemic hit. And I wasn't in Aer Lingus in 2020, but I know that the discussions with all of the union groups were intensive and in many cases very productive.
Aer Lingus told Sinn Féin's Darren O'Rourke that it believed antigen testing should replace PCR testing.
Is it fair to say that you see the requirement for PCR testing as a deterrent for international travel?
Yeah, we do see PCR tests as expensive, as onerous, as a deterrent to travel. We do believe that antigen testing should be adopted as the standard for pre-departure screening.
Aer Lingus insisted that conditionality should not be applied to any financial aid packages that the airline might receive. Management also asked that US and UK passengers are treated in a similar way to those travelling under the EU digital COVID certificate regime when it's implemented on the 19th of July.
They are two key markets for aviation. We don't believe that an evidence-based approach would conclude there should be differences in the restrictions between travellers, Ireland, UK, Ireland, USA, and the rest of Europe.
That's the Chief Executive of Aer Lingus, Lynn Embleton, ending that report by Tommy Meskel.
This is the gorgeous opening of Aaron Copland's Clarinet Concerto, where quiet beauty is stunningly matched by thrilling vitality and swinging jazz. You can hear it and his powerful Appalachian Spring on Friday, June 25th as part of RT National Symphony Orchestra Live. David Brophy conducts and Matthew Billing is the soloist. Live streamed to rt.ie/culture at 7 p.m. See rt.ie/NSO.
Amazon Prime Day is here. 2 days of non-stop deals on everything from electronics to home and kitchen and more. Hear that? It's the sound of you relaxing while your new robot vacuum does your chores for you. Amazon Prime Day is here. 2 days of non-stop deals. Join Amazon Prime to enjoy Prime Day. Amazon Prime is a paid subscription. See terms and conditions on amazon.co.uk/.